What's up, everybody? Billy Jitsu coming back at you with another DeFi tutorial. For those that don't know the series, I mess around with DeFi protocols, SDKs, basically anything around DeFi, and then try to make tools that I would use for myself. Today, we are talking about bridging, specifically across network for fast bridging. For the most part, we all know what bridges are, like move money from one chain to another. There are great bridges out there, Layer Zero, Wormhole, Axelar. But across network has made a name for itself with their intents. I'm not going to go into the intents, but basically, long story short, because it takes a long time to bridge from one side to the other because we worry about confirmations and being able to roll back a chain by chance. Cross network says basically someone's willing to take the risk of that rollback for a fee, right? So then I can move my money from one chain to another within a few seconds, which is great, right? So why does that even matter for DeFi? Well, fragmentation, right? Liquidity fragmentation across different L2s on different chains. If I can buy ETH on one chain for $2,000 and then go and sell it on another chain for 2010 because there's some kind of liquidity incentive, I want part of that, right? And before it gets totally arbitraged on the same chain, I need to move that money quick from one chain to the next. And that's where a cross network comes in, right? So like being able to just bridge on whatever chain, on whatever opportunity is where I'm at. So looking into the docs, I could not find a backend script that would just let me run a script from one chain to the other. And so I went ahead and made one myself. So let's go ahead and go through the code. When you check the repo, you'll see that you have two scripts. I made the first script as a testing one just to do a quick, like kind of like almost hard-coded way to get from Arbitrum to Optimism, and basically go through the flow of it. So we'll start with that one first. All you really need for this repo is a .env, I'm sorry, a private key for your .env. That's all you really need. We're using the VM chains on here. The example they gave me is in VM, so I'm not using Ethers, I'm using VM for this one. So it may look a little bit different from what you're used to, but it's a totally new, hot, I don't want to say hot, but a new format to connect to the blockchain with it. So definitely learn VM. It's definitely something that you need to do, especially if you're using on like WAGMI or something for front end. You're pretty much familiar with it anyways. But anyways, let's take it from the top. So I'm just going to be setting up my wallet through VM. So making sure that we have a private key for it. And this is how you create your account with your wallet client. Nothing too special on here, but we're just generating that wallet object. Here we actually need the SDK from Across. So if you look at the top, I see the create Across client from the app SDK. So here is the Across client, and I'm choosing the chains that I want to support in the object. So for our case, I'm using Optimism and Arbitrum. I just threw it in there so you can see the array. And then looking at the amount that we're sending, because I'm doing this on mainnets, I'm doing a very, very low amount on there. So, your choice. You can't go any lower than this because it'll say the value is too low, so it won't do it. So this is the bare minimum. And I'm just constantly logging that out. And this is the most important part. This is your route, right? Where are you going? Where are you going to? What tokens are you using? So I'm doing it from Arbitrum, and I'm going to go over to Optimism. I'm using the IDs that are built into VM already, so I'm just using ID. Make sure not to use it as a string, but the actual ID, so it's a number. And then this is the wrapped ETH version on Arbitrum and the wrapped ETH version on Optimism, right? The thing is, I want to use my native ETH, so there is a little Boolean on here on the route. I had to go right into the GitHub here to see that, so just in case, save you some time. If it's native, just put that Boolean to true. If it's false, then it'll use the wrapped token addresses. So make sure that you have wrapped ETH in there if you're going to use the wrapped ETH version. If not, if you're going to use the native token, make sure to set that Boolean to true. I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, so you're welcome. All right, anyways, once we have our route, we're just going to get our quote, right? We're going to build our quote on there based on our route and our input amount, which is basically what we're sending out. And it's going to return a quote to us, right? It's going to tell us what it is and like how much it's going to cost. For me, I wanted to make sure that I have some acceptable outcome, right? What's the fee? It can't be too high. So I make sure that I have it to 99.5 for demo purposes. And just to show you, I switch it to 99.05 to make sure that it goes through and I don't fail, right? Like if I don't get a good quote, that all depends on liquidity and whatnot. So, but pretty much for the most part, you're getting about 99% on most of your trades for low amounts, right? It's like 2 cents or something. And then, if it's acceptable, move on. If it's not acceptable, stop the script, right? And then once we have our quote and we're ready to go, we're going to go ahead and execute the quote, right? So we have our wallet client, our quote deposit, and then basically keep track of it and make sure where it's at. So I'm just going to go through like a multi-step process. You'll see this in the console log of like a whole script of if it's approved or pending. And we're just keeping track of that whole balance transfer across one chain to the next. So we're going from Arbitrum to Optimism, and it's going to take a step by step on here. So you can like basically loop around and see where we're at on the transaction. And at the end, you'll see that we have our deposit ID, so we can just look at where our status is on the across network based on the deposit ID. And that's pretty much it, right? It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I just couldn't find an example on here, so I made it myself. So let's go ahead and run that. And so I think I made a package here. So if I just do yarn sample, and make sure you have a little bit of ETH in your Optimism wallet, I'm sorry, Arbitrum wallet. Yarn sample, we'll just watch that go through. And you'll see that I have a console log and in quote for my 0.001 ETH. It's going to see my quote, right? 2 seconds is my limit time. That's how long it's going to take. And the output percentage is 99.96. So like almost 100%. And there it goes. There's my deposit ID. And then I console log out the relay information, which gives me all the details about it. And I'm pretty sure by the time I get here, it's already done. And I have my money on the other networks. I have my money on Optimism. Pretty straightforward, really easy, right? So you can check that. So I wanted to do that as a test. Took me a little while to get that all going based on the example, but great, right? I don't want to hard code my stuff. So then I started getting a little bit larger on here. So we go into the across bridge, which is a little bit more in detail, a little bit more in depth. That would be nicer for you to use, right? So in here, you're looking, there's a tools folder that has configurations. In our configurations is where I'm going to have my bridge operations, which is basically any way that I want to go. So if I'm building an arbitrage bot, I might be going between 2 or 3 different networks, and I'll be checking back and forth. And I just have a naming system, right? I want ETH, Arbitrum to Optimism. So basically my origin chain ID, which is, I had the opposite, right? This I'm going to Optimism to Arbitrum, or Arbitrum to Optimism. How much do I want to switch, right? And how many decimals it is. And I want to use native ETH. As an example, we can do USDC from Ethereum to Polygon. And right now this is false. And so basically it'll only run this. If you want to run this route, you run true. If you don't want to run it, run false. So you can make a script to turn those on and off. So just a couple examples to see how I was doing my routing. Basically just like false and then, true if I want to use a native, right? Also different thresholds. I want to make sure that I do not bridge anything if I'm not getting anything less or anything less than 99.5 in my bridge, right? Maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit less, but in my acceptable threshold, it's no less than 99.5 for the amount of money that I'm putting in. The higher the amount, there's a certain percentage, but just as an example, I want to do for testing purposes, don't bridge anything if it's not at least 99.5% that I'm getting back on the other side. Now, the maximum fill time, I put it up to a minute, but usually you'll get it in like 2-3 seconds. But, especially for arbitrage, you want to make sure that you have this in a matter of seconds. So, that fill time maybe be like really, really low, like 5 seconds max, right? Otherwise, we miss the opportunity. And then, again, we'll try it again if, there is a few failed attempts, we can retry it again. I just put extremely long time for 10 minutes just because it's just let it run, right? And then monitoring, if we want to pull our monitoring system to see where we're at every chain, every 10 seconds, just check updates to make sure that we're up and running. And then how many attempts that we want to do. We'll do 5 minutes of polling just to see if our bridge went through. If we haven't done it in 5 minutes, we lost the opportunity. Where's our money? Just check it. But, that's just more of a console log type of thing for us. And then notifications just to make sure that, notify me about everything on here. I want to keep a log of everything that's happening here. And then all the supported tokens. So I just, call the script to see what are the supported tokens on there. That's on the docs. And just created a whole list of all the tokens that are popular, like WETH, USDC, USDT, wrap BTC, all the supported tokens. For the most part, maybe 1 or 2 tokens that we're going to be working on. When you start expanding that token list, it gets pretty heavy in the RPC calls. And then all the chains they support. Basically, I popped in the RPC URLs for each one of them, so then I can use that. You can change that to yourself. Like your own custom RPC if you want, like if you're using Infura, Alchemy, or whoever, and so, yep, I just grabbed the whole list of all the available supported ones, and then different token addresses and decimals, right? If I'm using USDC, I know there's 6, USDT, I know it's 6, and then wrap BTC, I know it's 8. So just a few decimals on there, depending on if I'm moving ETH or wrapped ETH or whatever token on there. So just a little tool to help me going, so I don't have to look up the decimals here. And then, if I have something to auto execute, like if it gives me the right information, do I want to execute it? Yes, I do. Any slippage on any kind of like, DEX arbitrage, that's the max I'm willing to take. And then I want to see all this transaction history. I want to see, like, if I'm away and I'm looking at logs, I want to just save it to a file on there. So this is just all the information on here that I have. And then these helper functions just help me do things if I'm looking for token addresses. I kind of use it to build it. This one was kind of vibe coded, like, hey, let me test a few things to make sure things look good. So like, get me the token decimals. If I pop the token symbol, like, what decimals will I have? So it helped me generate all these different tools to generate the decimals, right? So these are just things that I built in just to help me, get all the structures that I need in order to execute right away. So this is just a little helper tool. And then I needed a way to test that out. So if I use like yarn test helper, I think if that was correct, oops, I just yarn test, it's just going to test this configuration helper file. So like yarn test, it's just going to give me like a quick layout of, testing all these functions and everything, making sure all my tokens are looking the way it needs to be. So if you wanted to mess around, look how I tested it all out, different routes, did that all work? Different bridge operations, do they work? So, again, just something to mess around to make sure that the things that I was doing and vibe coding actually looked correct, right? And then we go into the nitty gritty of this entire thing, which is the across bridge, which is actually the one that's important, right? I'm just basically importing all these different tools. All the other stuff looks like the same from the previous script. And then kind of rebuilding that same thing, right? The VM, building my wallet, looking at the supported chains, creating my across client with all the supported chains I have so I can, cross chain to every chain that I need to. Here I want to log with time. So instead of just console logging it, I want to know the exact date, timestamp and everything. So that way, if I go back, I can see exactly when it happened on my local files. And then this is just to save all the transactions to my file on a local file so I can just review it later. So when I have it running, overnight or whatever, I can, and just basically save the results on here. Let me scroll down. And then basically functions, right? Get quote was the same thing that we did here. It was just hard coded, right? When I get my quote right here, it's just now a function. Instead of having this whole thing as a one large script, I just have different functions for each one. So I just get quote, which is the same thing, just getting all the decimals just in case, some backups in case I put a new token in and I forget to do the decimals. So just some backup stuff on here. Create my route based on, my initial setup of what I have approved and not approved in the config. And then basically give me some log information all logged out. And then check if I exceed the threshold, if I get quote, do I meet the 99.5% on there? Check again, make sure that everything's good. Give me a fail safe just in case. And then execute it, right? Execute the quote. It looks good. Just run it again. And then basically a little bit more modular so I can, switch chains without having to worry about hard coding it, right? So just a little bit more flexible of a quote on there. So that's why I made this sample one. So it's easier to kind of like go through the flow of it. And there we go. And then pull the depositing stance. So once I've done it, make sure that my deposit is looking good. Keep track of where my deposit is. Is it still on the original chain? Did it get sent over to the other chain? So just give me that ID. And that's pretty much it. And just log all my information, right? So this is the main function that actually executes, that calls all those different functions. I just log it all out and basically call all these functions out on here. So let's go ahead and look at it. And let's see here. Let's go yarn bridge. And look at all that information come out. And so you see that getting the quote for that bridge that I did hard coded on there on the config. It's going to give me the quote details, all the information, fill time 2 seconds. So again, super fast. You see it's already done in the transaction history. But basically going through the whole thing, what the fee is, 0.26. So I know that I have 99.7. We are within the minimum range to create this bridge. So if there is an arbitrage opportunity for me, it's going to be minimum slippage. I may make money. And then basically run the operation, right? It's going to basically read off my my quote here from this ETH bridge to optimism. If we looked at the config, that is exactly what I called it on the very top of that route. It's just labeling for me to read it better, right? And then seeing the deposit on the Arbitrum chain, and then just seeing the transaction ID. I get this console log of all the information that's happening on the across network. And then once it's all done, bridge complete, it's filled the transaction hash. So I have everything on file ready to go on there, and it has been completed with success. So if I go to my transaction history and look at that, I can see everything that's kind of important to me on the fly. What was the output amount? What were the fees, relay fees, LP fees, right? And so that way I can keep track of anything. If anything goes wrong, or, if I want to optimize something a little bit better, I have this data as reference, and then I can go on with my day and look for the best, opportunities for me. Anyways, hopefully I thought that was helpful. Again, feel free to use it, feel free to contribute, and carry on.